You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
Welcome to the HawgBeat Hour. I'm your host, Mason Choate, joined by managing editor of HawgBeat.com, Andrew Hutchinson, and recruiting expert at HawgBeat.com, Alex Trader. As always, we have a busy episode today, but before we get started, I just want to ask everybody, if you like what you see, give it a thumbs up, give us a 5-star if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube, and always go to HawgBeat.com and check out all the content we got over there as well. It's the best in the business, and it's well worth your time and your money. So, all right, guys, let's get started. So we got to talk about the Kentucky game. It's not one of those games that you can just like skip over. So Arkansas beats Kentucky 75-73 in Bud Walton Arena. And I'm going to be honest, I wasn't there. So I'm going to let you talk about that game for the most part, because I don't want to say anything that is not correct. So just tell us what you thought. I asked somebody else in the media Wednesday at the LSU game. I said, what was the atmosphere for the Kentucky game compared to the Auburn game? And I probably shouldn't have asked the question, because he said, I think it was better. And that made me feel a lot worse inside that I wasn't there. But anyways, Hutch, just take it away.
Well, it's not like you just totally skipped out on everything, because you're down in Round Rock for baseball. Of course, you just had to spend the day watching nothing because of the rain out. But oh well. It was an incredible atmosphere, though. I mean, I think the Auburn game was probably a more sustained loudness throughout the entire 40 minutes. I've never experienced anything like that Auburn game. Like, my ears literally hurt after the game. It was so loud. Kentucky, I think, had more loud moments that maybe got a little bit louder than what it was in the Auburn game. It just wasn't quite as sustained. But it was, both of them, it's really hard to pick one or the others, whichever one was the better environment. They were both incredible. The Kentucky game, Arkansas, early on, it looked like they were going to run away with it. They got up, I can't remember, at 13 or something like that, and they were clicking on all cylinders. It looked like if Kentucky didn't respond when they did, it looked like Arkansas was going to run away with it for an easy win. But Kentucky did in the half on a really good run, cut the lead to, I can't remember, it was definitely single digits, and it was kind of a disappointing finish to the half. And then, of course, Kentucky comes out and throws the first punch in the second half. They actually took the lead, and that's the second half of basketball. If you're just a casual college basketball fan, you had to love that second half. It was just haymaker after haymaker. There were, I think, 16 lead changes in the second half alone. I think there was a 5-minute stretch with like 8 lead changes or 9 lead changes, and neither team led by more than 1 point. It was just every possession felt like it was the biggest possession of the game. And it was one of those games where it was really hard. Journalists know this. Like, it's really hard to really start your story, because you're thinking like, oh, is this going to be the turning point? This is what I'm going to start, my story with. And it was like, no, because the other team answered. And it was just an incredible, incredible game. Arkansas just found a way to pull it out at the end. And really, they should have won by 5. But Kentucky got a banked buzzer beater from near half court at the buzzer that I know some people, if you gamble on games, probably either loved it or hated it, because it swung the result the other way. So, but still, for Arkansas, it didn't matter, because a win's a win. And anytime you can beat Kentucky, anytime you can beat a top 10 team like that, it was a big deal.
So just looking at this game, it was a JD Notae statement game, I believe. 30 points against the guy who is probably the favorite to win SEC Player of the Year, Oscar Tshiebwe, who also scored 30 points, and he had 18 rebounds. But JD Notae was on the winning team, and the winning team won a lot, or in big part to JD Notae scoring 30 points. And then you look, and it was the Jalen Williams puke game. I guess that's what people were calling it, because he was throwing up at halftime. So, and then, but I want to bring this up, because I'm looking here on the stat sheet, and it's like, so Arkansas is down 70-69 with 2 minutes and 21 seconds left. And then Jalen Williams hits a shot with 1:22 to give Arkansas the lead. And then about 30 seconds later, he hits 2 more free throws to extend the lead to 73-70. So, I mean, how often are we seeing it that Jalen Williams hits a big shot in the second half, and it's a big reason why Arkansas wins the game, Hutch?
Yeah, he's just got a knack for making plays whenever you need it. And I know we'll talk about the LSU game here in a little bit, but I think that's what made the LSU win so much more impressive, is that he wasn't on the floor in the critical stretch of the game. But he was against Kentucky, and thank goodness he was. He knocked down that jumper to put him up with a little over a minute left, and then Arkansas really ratcheted up the defense, forced a turnover, I believe. There was an offensive foul that I know Kentucky fans didn't like, but I thought it was a very clear offensive foul on an inbound play. So it was just Jalen Williams is so incredible. And, you mentioned it was the Jalen Williams puke game. Comes to find out, allegedly, per Eric Musselman, the sickness that JD Note apparently also felt was due to them eating too many pancakes that morning and it being a 1 o'clock tip. I it's just kind of one of those things. I mentioned that to my wife, and she made the comment like, sometimes you forget that these guys are still kids, and they probably didn't think like, oh, hey, maybe I should eat a light breakfast because we're getting ready to play number 6 Kentucky in front of 20,000 fans and 2 million people watching on TV on CBS. They were just like, hey, man, I want some pancakes. And so for Jalen Williams to overcome that and be able to play the way he did in the second half and down the stretch, when Eric Musselman said they weren't sure what they were going to get from Jalen Williams in the second half, they were already making contingency plans like, how are we going to get by without Jalen being Jalen? And Jalen sucked it up, and he was able to make those key plays that we've known him to make all year.
I mean, honestly, I would say you might prefer your players to have that mindset of, hey, we're just gonna go get some pancakes. It's another Saturday, because you don't want them like having all those nerves, like, oh, this is a big game. Like, I don't know how I feel about it. It maybe brings a little comfort that they're that chill about a game like that. But speaking of not having Jalen Williams on the court against LSU on Wednesday night, Jalen Williams fouls out with like what 5 minutes left ish in the second half. And I was talking to Alex, and I'll bring you in on this, Alex. Before we started, it's like once Jalen Williams fouled out in that LSU game, it was like, okay, right to lead. The game's decided. You felt like LSU was playing good enough to that point. If Arkansas doesn't have Jalen Williams on the court, this game's over.
Oh, absolutely. And I told you beforehand, I audibly just said, hey, oh, well, this one's over, because there was no stopping the LSU getting to the line and just being able to constantly get there, make free throws. They could miss as many shots as they wanted to because they were always getting the rebound. And once you lose your top rebounder, that becomes even more of a problem. It was a massive, massive stretch for this team to be able to go in without their best, without, in my eyes, the most important player on this team. You can argue best between him and JD Note, but the most important player to this team throughout all phases of the game, and be able to come away with the win without him there for that close stretch with the last 5 minutes. That's arguably, I mean, you have the win over Auburn, the win over Tennessee, the win over Kentucky, that make you think, hey, we can beat any team in the country. Having that happen makes you even more confident about March, because crazy things happen in March. You never know how these games are going to go. You never know who's going to be on the court for you win, and being able to come away without that top player for your team is a massive, massive takeaway for Eric Musselman.
So Williams goes down, but if you look at it, JD Note hits a three about 50 seconds into the game, and then he doesn't score for another 28 and a half-ish minutes. And so, Hutch, I want to ask you, like, how key is that for Arkansas that whole first half, from the 19-10 mark in the first half to the end of the first half, JD Note didn't score a point. Now, he was still on the court and he was doing things and he was helping the team out, but that's your go-to scorer. And Arkansas goes into halftime tied 35-35 with LSU, and JD Note has 3 points. And I mean, Stanley Amude, he helped out a lot. But it feels like when you have a game from Au'Diese Toney where he quietly scores 18, and I don't think that's like an overstatement. Saying Au'Diese Toney quietly scores 18 points it's pretty accurate, because at the end of this game, when I see that he scored 18 points, I would not have, if you would have asked me without me looking at the box score, I wouldn't say 18 points. And I think that's a big reason why Arkansas won this game.
I think really you look at JD Notae, yes, he didn't score very well, but look at how LSU played him. I mean, they were just all over him the entire game. They were face guarding him. They weren't letting him get the ball. They were, I think Eric Musselman and I think Jimmy Dykstra in the game used the term they blitzed them, and that they made it hard on him. But when you're doing that, it opens things up for other guys. And luckily for Arkansas, they have some guys that have proven they can take over a game offensively. I mean, Jalen Williams was really effective, especially in the first half, and he ended up finishing with 19 points. Who knows what he could have finished with had he, stayed out of foul trouble. Stanley Amude, 23 points. I mean, he's a guy that can be a scorer. I mean, he dropped 31, I think, in a game earlier this season. He's had a couple of 20-point games as well. I think over the last 6 games, he's averaging 15. So he's been playing really well. Audice Toney, you mentioned him. Whenever he's doing what he does, and I think one reason why it felt like he quietly had 18 is because he wasn't doing anything that just really wowed you, like, oh my gosh, what an incredible drive to the basket or whatever. He's just making cuts and getting past too, and it's just a layup or a dunk or something like that. And it's just like, okay, that's a easy bucket. And well, those add up. And so I think that was kind of key to Arkansas last night is they've got guys that are capable of stepping up, and they all did. I felt like, Jalen stepped up offensively, Tony stepped up, Stanley stepped up. I mean, that was huge. And I think that's what makes this team so dangerous is even if, say, Amude was off, you've had games like that, and then Devo scores a lot, or somebody else. Chris Likes has had some good big games. So there are different guys on this team that are capable, even whenever you're guys that you usually count on, like JD Notae, for example, averaging 19 points a game. If he doesn't quite have his usual level of production, you've got someone else that can step up and fill his shoes.
Yeah, I mean, just a few things that we heard post game, kind of going off of that. You mentioned the blitzing that they were doing on JD Notae. Jalen Williams said that as well, and he said that he would come off a screen and they would be hitting Notae hard, but it would open it up for Williams and they would find him. And so early in the first half, Jalen Williams was having a lot of success down low. He was forcing his way inside, and that was not part of the game plan. It's just what they were giving to him because they were hitting Notae so hard. And then with Audice Toney, Eric Musselman said that he thinks Audice Toney is the best basket cutter in all of college basketball. So that's some pretty high praise from Eric Musselman for Audice Toney. And I think he might be right, but I agree with you on the statement that this team has players that can step up. And I mean, we talked about this. We kind of go at this most episodes, but earlier in the year, you didn't have that. You didn't have guys that could step up. And Alex, you're shaking your head, so I'll ask you. I mean, like, it felt like it was Notae or bust, and then it became Notae and Williams or bust, and now you got guys all around that you can rely on.
Yeah, I know. We talked about Jalen Williams and JD Notae and how big they were, and even Audice Toney. But the real hero of that game was Stanley Amude being able to knock down those threes down the stretch. Kept this game from getting out of hand. LSU, every time they missed, like I said, they were getting the ball back. So it makes it almost impossible for you to get into a rhythm and feel comfortable with going in and just taking twos because you know that they're going to get those twos back. So Amude being able to go in and knock down a couple of those threes and make this game manageable again was massive. I think that was the biggest question for us whenever we were talking earlier in the year about whether or not this was a legitimate tournament team or a team that could make it back to where it was last year was what are they going to do when JD Notae can't score the way he has been, or what are they going to do when Jalen Williams isn't out there? And we've seen now that there is that kind of hierarchy where those two do generally take over, but you can see a guy like Stanley Amude, a guy like Devo Davis even, or Audice Toney go out there and get you a couple of buckets and really contribute, not even just scoring, but on the defensive end, or passing, or just making those cuts like we were talking about.
Yeah, you mentioned Amude's 3-pointers in the second half, but some people were saying over on our HawgBeat message board, the Trough, this morning, Amude's basket at the end of the first half that tied it 35-35 going into halftime. That was a huge bucket because Arkansas wins this game by 1 point. If you don't have that basket going into half, I mean, Arkansas, as always, I mean, it was just a rough stretch going through at the end of the first half. And they get that shot, and, that creates a little bit of momentum going into halftime coming out. Of course, LSU came out at halftime, scored 7 straight, and Eric Musselman called a timeout a minute and a half in. But I want to go to the end of the game real quick before we wrap up this segment. So Kamani Johnson gets hooked up with Wilkinson of LSU. A flagrant foul is called. So Kamani goes to the line with a chance to tie it up at 76. Of course, he only makes one. So Arkansas is down by 1. And Note, so then Arkansas gets the possession. And then Note turns it over. But then LSU goes down. They don't score a point. And Note comes out with it. He gets fouled. He makes both his free throws. Hutch, this team can make shots under pressure. And that is a great attribute to have going into March.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I think we've talked about it, in previous episodes. Sometimes whenever Arkansas is in those situations, shot clock off, you need a bucket to either tie or take the lead. They haven't gone particularly well under Eric Musselman. However, they bucked that trend against LSU with Note getting to the free throw line. Did he benefit from a friendly whistle, friendly call? Probably. I mean, whenever it happened, I thought he traveled. After seeing a replay, I don't know. I mean, it was a bang play. It just, when you're Arkansas, when you followed this program as long as we have, you don't expect Arkansas to get a call like that. So you got to give the officials some credit there. You get the benefit of a call. But for Note to go to the free throw line, 8 seconds left, and to knock him down cold-blooded like that, that's huge. I mean, we've seen, in recent years, we've seen Daryl Macon do that. We've seen Jalen Tate do that against Kentucky last year on the road. To see JD Note do it, that was a really good sign, because you're probably going to need, and we've seen it already this year with Arkansas, you're going to need to ice games at the free throw line down the stretch. And they're a really, really good free throw shooting team. I think they go 24-28 or something last night. That is a massive help whenever you're trying to win a game like that.
Let's see. Free throws for Arkansas. Yeah, 24 of 28. Tony was 6 of 6. Note 4 of 4. Amude 4 of 4. Williams 7 of 8. So let's see, 3 of your 4 misses came from Devontae Davis and Kamani Johnson. Okay, well, we're going to wrap this segment up, and then we're going to talk some more Razorback basketball coming up. Of course, only one game left in the regular season. They go to Tennessee on Saturday. So we'll look ahead to that, and then we'll kind of look ahead to the SEC tournament as well here on the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
All right, we're back here on the HawgBeat Hour. The HawgBeat crew, Mason Choate, Alex Trader, and Andrew Hutchinson with you. All right, this segment is going to be dedicated to Hutch. You mentioned that you want to embrace your inner Stephen A. Smith, so we will allow you to do that now. I'll set you up with so Arkansas with the win over Kentucky. Their net ranking moved up 1 spot from 24 to 23. That was on Saturday, and then also on Saturday, LSU beat Missouri at home, and they moved up from 18 to 16. And then Arkansas beats LSU on Wednesday, and they move up 2 spots to 21 in the net rankings. And I think LSU stayed put. So I will now open up the floor to you, Mr. Hutchinson.
Well, first of all, any ranking that has LSU ahead of Arkansas is obviously flawed. I mean, just look at LSU. Completely, let's disregard the fact that Arkansas has beaten them both at home and on the road, which I don't know how you can disregard that, but let's do it for the sake of the argument. Arkansas has won, I think, 14 out of their last 15? They've beaten Kentucky. They've beaten Auburn. They've beaten Tennessee, and they've gone on the road. They've won some games. They've beaten Florida on the road. And the one loss they had, it wasn't like they got blown out either. And it was on the road against a high-ranking net team in Alabama. So to me, it's obviously flawed. There is absolutely no reason Arkansas should be behind LSU for one. And I totally get the fans' frustration whenever it comes to these net rankings. It just the formula is kind of it's hidden. Like we don't know the exact like okay, this is plug in the numbers wherever like the RPI, which is what the net replaced. You actually kind of knew the formula. That's why you had other websites that could do the RPI. It was all based. There's a little element of that to the net rankings, but there's also the element of the efficiency ratings. Stuff like you see on KenPom or Bart Torvik, I think is how you say it. Those kind of websites, the BPI. So those efficiency rankings are factored in there, and so that's why you get results like Missouri moving or LSU beating Missouri, which is a just horrible team, and destroying them. Leads to them going up 2, where Arkansas only jumps 1 with a close win over Kentucky. That, to me, it just doesn't make sense. And I think that obviously the AP poll is flawed. I mean, you've got different AP voters have different styles of how they're going to vote, things like that. But at least you can look at it logically and go, okay, LSU has a losing record over the last month and a half. They are not deserving of being a top 25 team. And it's also really confusing to me because I don't think LSU played a particularly, impressive non-conference schedule. I mean, I think they had a win over Wake Forest or something like that. I mean, how is that any different than a win over Cincinnati for Arkansas? I mean, those are pretty comparable games, and yet here they are still ranked ahead. They're also ahead of Arkansas in the KenPom rankings, which is a little bit interesting. LSU's non-conference ranking non-conference strength of schedule is 184. Arkansas's is 242. You can't really defend Arkansas's non-conference slate because it was horrible. They didn't exactly play great during that slate either, but it's not so much so that their incredible conference run should outweigh that. I mean, they are right up there with the likes of Kentucky, who's number 4 in the KenPom rankings, Auburn, who's number 7, and Tennessee, who's number 11. You have to go all the way down to 19 in KenPom's rankings. So I don't understand it. I think that Eric Musselman said it best in the post-game press conference after the LSU game, and that what are these things, and hopefully the human element whenever the selection committee gets together and they look at the teams and they're like, okay, this team's better than number 21, like the net rankings say, or whatever. I just can't imagine the Hofstra and the Vanderbilt losses forever ago would still impact the rankings like that. I mean, the Hofstra loss happened before Christmas. I mean, so much has happened since then, and yet it still seems to be kind of holding Arkansas down. And Hofstra isn't a terrible team. I mean, they're right around the 100, 110 range or whatever in the net rankings. So I don't know. I don't get it. And I totally understand Eric Musselman's frustrations, whenever he went on that rant after the game.
So I'm just looking at the SEC standings, and LSU's 20-10 overall record. They're 8-9 in conference play, 3-8 on the road. And then okay, so I'm with you. I don't get it. How is Kentucky? I get Kentucky because they have quality wins. Tennessee has some quality wins, but Arkansas beat Auburn, Arkansas beat Kentucky, Arkansas beat Tennessee, Arkansas beat LSU. When does beating a team no longer mean anything? And also, what do you, Hutch, say to the people who reply to this with rankings don't matter, just win games?
Well, unfortunately, the net rankings do matter because the NCAA tournament selection committee uses them. I mean, the AP poll, yeah, that doesn't matter really. I mean, it's great for being able to refer to a team as a number or whatever, but the net rankings actually do matter. Now, I have, based on what I've read, what I understand, I don't know if this is entirely accurate because the selection committee, I don't know how open they are about this stuff, but I don't think they necessarily go, okay, well, this team's number 21 in the net rankings, so we're going to have to slot them as a whatever seed that would be. I mean, I think that would be a 6 seed because I think the top 5 seeds are all in the top 20. So I don't think they do that. However, they use the net to kind of put different games in different quadrants. We always talk about quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. But how are those quadrants determined? They're determined by your ranking. And so I get it, like, oh, well, Arkansas maybe didn't move up that much because the rankings, in that range or whatever. Like, we don't know what the actual numeric value is. Like, how close is number 21 to number 20? Is there a big gap there, or is there not? I think about the SP plus ratings in college football that Bill Connolly does over at ESPN. He has an actual like numeric value, and it shows you like, okay, Alabama or Georgia is this much ahead of number 2. Like, there's a big gap. There isn't that numeric value, as far as I know, for the net rankings. But again, if the quadrants are determined solely on the rankings, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like Vanderbilt, for example, they actually moved down from 77 to 79 despite not playing on Wednesday night, and that's a big deal for Arkansas, because if they can get to the top 75, instead of that being a quad 3 loss, which looks pretty ugly on the resume, it would become a quad 2 loss. How is 4 spots in the rankings that influential? I don't get it. It's very confusing and weird. But to be fair, there's probably not a perfect way to do it. The selection committee is going to be criticized regardless what they do. You just hope that they can look at how Arkansas's played over this, second half of the season and be able to factor that more so than the ugly losses to Hofstra, Vanderbilt, the blowout to Oklahoma, road loss to Mississippi State, road loss to A&M. Those aren't terrible losses, but you hope they can look over that whenever they're considering Arkansas's resume as a whole.
Okay, well, we got to move on from this. As much as I'm sure you would like to sit here and talk about it longer, we got to talk about Tennessee this weekend. So Arkansas travels to Tennessee. The Volunteers are 15-0 at home this year. It's not going to be easy, but you're talking about quality wins. If Arkansas can get a win in Knoxville going into the SEC tournament, I really don't think it matters how they do in the SEC tournament unless they go and they win the whole dang thing. I think that you're pretty secure as at least a top 4 seed. Would you say, Hutch?
Yeah, I guess that's one kind of small takeaway you could take from the net rankings from the most recent net rankings is LSU went on the road to Arkansas and lost a close one, and they didn't move. So you'd think that if Arkansas goes on the road to Tennessee and doesn't come out on top, as long as they don't get blown out by 20 or something, I think that Arkansas should stay put, and they're pretty secure, in my opinion, as a 4 seed. And as you said, I mean, I guess they could go on a run, and depending on who they get matched up with in the SEC tournament, maybe they could, bump up a seed line. But to me, I think they've earned themselves a 4 seed.
Alex, I want to ask you real quick because you haven't gone in on the conversation. Let's talk just SEC power rankings, because you look up and down, and it's really a 4-team show between Auburn, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Where do you slate the Hogs there? I mean, it's hard to say that there's one of those teams ahead of them, at least in my mind, because Arkansas beat all of them. But we all know that one game doesn't always mean everything. So what do you think?
Yeah, a lot of times in these conversations, you'll have a situation where, maybe a team like Arkansas had beaten a Kentucky earlier on in the season, and maybe the 2 teams have gone a little bit different. And even, I mean, Vanderbilt is not a better team than Arkansas. They beat Arkansas, but they're very clearly not a better team. I think this case that doesn't apply because Arkansas beat all 3 of these teams in the last 2 or 3 weeks. You're really looking at a team right now that, as a lot of, half the people were saying, oh, the season's a wash. Half the people were saying, just wait till March, just wait till March, just wait till March. We waited till March, and I think we're seeing a team that really is, in my eyes, the best team in the SEC, is going on a run that I don't think anyone was expecting. I think every time we do one of these, we're like, okay, well, if they can go just over 500 for this next stretch, I think that they're in a good spot. If they can win one of Kentucky, Auburn, Tennessee, I think they're in a good spot. They're going out and winning all of these games outside of the Alabama game, which was a 1-point loss on the road. I think Arkansas has to be one in those rankings, and slating them in, I think it's all about how teams are finishing. Kentucky is playing pretty good basketball. And they do have Sheway, who's gonna bump you up and give you an advantage over most teams in the country. So I'd probably have them too, and then maybe Tennessee and Auburn are pretty interchangeable. I believe Tennessee beat Auburn last week, so maybe slate them right ahead. And Auburn really, escaped Mississippi State last night. Likely going to hold on to that SEC crown, but it does make you wonder whether or not they're a team that peaked too early, or if they're a team that's actually going to be able to contend as a 1 seed come the NCAA tournament.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this segment up. We're going to talk some football and then talk some Razorback baseball here on the HawgBeat Hour, but that's going to do it for our basketball talk, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
All right, we're back here on the HawgBeat Hour talking a little bit of football here in March. Yes, we're in March. It's March 3rd, and on March 5th, this Saturday, Arkansas has another Junior Days coming up, and there's going to be some recruits on campus. So, Mr. Alex Trader, this is your time to shine, buddy. Tell us about the recruits that are coming to Fayetteville.
Yeah, it's going to be a big weekend for the Hogs. We saw, a couple commitments come during the January Junior Days. I don't know if that's going to be the same case here, but the big name to watch this weekend is Tron Webb, former Oklahoma commit, decommitted there with all the Lincoln Riley fallout, similar to how Luke Has did. You'd like to think that Has might be, trying to influence him a little bit there. If you're the Arkansas staff, you might be in his ear saying, hey, y'all talked in a while. What are you telling him about what it's like to be a Razorback commit? But he's a top level running back in this 23 class. He's rated as the number 3 running back in the country, 88 overall player in the Rivals 100. Really would be a massive pickup, especially following up. You have Dom Johnson, you have AJ Green, you have Rocket Sanders right now, and then Rashad Dubinion coming in this year, who's a really, really good running back, as well as James Joyner Jr. Just continuing to stack running back classes can't hurt the number of the SEC's leading rushing attack. As well as that, you've got, I believe, also at the running back position, the Gatorade Player of the Year for Kansas, Dylan Edwards. So that's another big opportunity for the staff to kind of nail down that running back position. And then that's just this week's main visitors for the running back position. At least we have a full list up on our premium message board over at HawgBeat, the Trough, so you guys can take advantage of that, especially if you're a college student. You're able to email Hutch. I believe it's at Andrew Hutchinson 413 @gmail.com with your .edu email address, and you're going to get a whole year of coverage for $11.95, which is you're not going to find that deal anywhere else. So definitely, if you're a college student, go take advantage of that. But we have the full list of visitors for this week as well as next week up on the board. Hutch, I know you talked to one of the March 12th visitors last week or earlier this week. Why don't you tell us a little bit about TJ Metcalf?
Yeah, TJ Metcalf, I actually reached out to him because I saw him tweet a screenshot of a FaceTime conversation he had with Dominique Bowman, the new defensive backs coach. And yeah, I'm just fascinated by how, Bowman has kind of hit the ground running recruiting wise. It's always interesting to get the comments from the recruits, like, hey, what do you think about this guy? Because we just see, oh, he's a young guy. He coached at Marshall for a year. Okay, big whoop. What else is there about him? Can he recruit? Based on the conversations I've had with a couple of guys, I've caught up with Dallas Young about him, the commitment from Alabama, and which I did notice where Dallas Young is visiting Ole Miss this weekend, and Sam Carter. That's going to be something to maybe keep an eye on. But I did catch up with TJ Metcalf, and he really likes Dominique Bowman. He feels like they have a really good relationship, and that he can really lean on him throughout the process, and he'll help him make his decision. You got to hope that decision includes Arkansas, if you're an Arkansas fan. But regardless, to get kind of some inroads, he's an Alabama kid. Alex and I were talking before. I guess he's a cousin of DK Metcalf, which, that's some pretty solid bloodline. So I think that would be a big time get for Arkansas if they can get him on campus and show him what the Hogs have to offer. And another thing that's working in Arkansas's favor is his younger brother. I believe his name is Tevis or something. Tev, I think is what they call him. He's a 2024. Arkansas has already offered him. That's his first, big time offer. I think his other offers were from a couple of HBCUs at the FCS level, including Deion Sanders and Jackson State. But that's big. I mean, if you can get a guy's brother, we've seen that work in Arkansas's favor in the past. Look at Jalen Catalon. Who knows how much it played into his decision, but you brought in Kendall as a transfer from the FCS level, and it helped you get Jalen Catalon. And hey, if that helps you get a really big time player, I'm all for it, because sometimes a player is good enough for 2 scholarships. Is TJ Metcalf that kind of player? I'm not sure, but obviously, if Arkansas feels good enough to legitimately offer his brother, if it's a committable offer, I think that kind of shows us what kind of level they think TJ is. So just another one of those big time prospects. I know they've got several DBs. You mentioned the running backs that are coming in over this next month. I think Javen Simpkins is another high 3-star recruit from, I think, Florida, that's coming in on the 12th. So lots of running backs that I've seen coming in, and also lots of defensive backs so far. We've kind of tracked down as guys come in for junior days.
All right. So aside from junior days, something else going on with football. The newcomers got their numbers. I know, Alex, you and a couple of the subscribers were a little frustrated with the way the graphic was put together. But talk about that a little bit. The guys that weren't early enrollees, they don't have numbers yet. So I was looking at it. I was like, where's Satania? But he doesn't have a number yet because he was not an early enrollee.
Yeah, where's Satania was a pretty common question on the board. As far as the design of the graphic, I don't know who did that. I thought it was a fine graphic. I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to get this up on the board real quick. And it might still have been fine to me. I don't think I would have noticed it, but someone pointed out, wow, I can't believe they put it out of order for just one line. And there's two number stretch that's out of order. Threw me off for the entire day. I couldn't do anything. I had to go home and take a nap just to kind of recover from it. But you've got all the newcomers with their numbers. I think that's a pretty exciting thing for the fan base and for the players as well. I'm sure just being able to see, hey, I have my number. I'm part of this team, and fans are kind of getting a first look at, hey, I might need to go ahead and get that number 9 jersey for Jaden Hazelwood, I believe was his number. That full list is up on the Arkansas recruiting Twitter, I believe, or maybe the Arkansas football Twitter. One of those two, maybe both. Maybe there's a retweet in there somewhere. But just it signifies the start of spring ball. We're close. Football season's almost here. Basketball in full swing. Baseball starting to get underway. Really just a great time to be an Arkansas sports fan, and I'm sure Hutch would agree, a sports writer as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to add too that in addition to all the newcomer numbers, they've updated the online roster. I have not finished it as of this recording, but by the time you're listening to it, you can probably go to HawgBeat.com, and I'm going to have my usual breakdown of which players have gained the most weight, lost the most weight over the offseason. That's always a big hit amongst the readers, because it's always like, okay, well, who's hit the weight room the hardest, who's improved the most in the off season, and the weight changes. While they don't tell us everything, they give us kind of an idea of, okay, maybe this guy is a guy to watch once we get into the spring practices.
Speaking of measurements, we just received the measurements for Traylon Burks at the NFL Combine. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't pay attention to measurements very much. It looks like he's 6'2", 225, 9 7/8 inch hands. Is that, we know he has big hands, but is that a big measurement? Do you guys know? Okay. You guys.
I think so. I mean, the dude wears 5XL gloves. I think that tells me everything I need to know, more than just an inches measurement.
Okay. Well, yeah, Arkansas, they are at the NFL Combine. Traylon Burks there. That's going to be the guy that people pay attention to. So that's also going on for football. Doesn't really have to do with Arkansas moving forward, but good for Traylon Burks. So anyways, we're going to talk Razorback baseball next. Get you set for the series this weekend, talking about Round Rock, all that here on the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
All right, we're back here on the HawgBeat Hour, last segment of the episode. So we're going to talk some Razorback baseball. Before we get to the midweek versus Omaha, got to talk about Round Rock. I'm going to be honest, not the greatest experience for myself, but I decided that I was going to make the most of the trip. Did so. We went to Omaha, or not Omaha. No, we went to Round Rock, and it was rough. So missed the Friday game because of a canceled flight. Arkansas beats Indiana 5-2 on Friday. Saturday, they don't have a game. It gets postponed. Play doubleheader on Sunday. Arkansas gets shut out by Stanford, and then they win the nightcap against Louisiana. So that's a quick rundown. We'll talk about that here in a second. If you want like a more in-depth recap of that, you can go listen to the Diamond Hogs podcast episode from this Monday. That's on the HawgBeat YouTube, or you can just search Diamond Hogs podcast wherever you get your podcasts. But Hutch, all right, I think the Indiana game, we don't really have to talk about that. I mean, Connor Nolan, 10 strikeouts, to be expected against a team like Indiana. No offense to Indiana, but I mean, come on. And then Stanford, that was the game. So you lose 5-0 to Stanford. Hagen Smith had a great debut as a Hog, but didn't look I wouldn't say didn't look the best, just didn't have his stuff going. I mean, Dave Van Horn said that it just wasn't there. His changeup couldn't even get it over the plate. It wasn't working for Hagen Smith against Stanford on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, Hagen Smith, he's a freshman. I think there were some people who immediately after the Illinois State series was like, oh my gosh, we've got to move Hagen Smith to Friday because he's your ace. He's way better than Connor Nolan. But I think I even said it on the podcast that Connor Nolan is probably going to be the more consistent guy because, I mean, he's super old. He's a senior. He's been here a million years. He's been there, done that. He's not going to get phased by too much. And you feel like you're going to get consistent outings from him. Even if he's not great, he's still going to get you innings. Hagen Smith, he's a freshman. There's going to be days where he goes out there and he throws 6 scoreless and looks like a future first-round pick. And then there's going to be other days where he can't get outs. He can't get – I think the 8 of the last 10 guys he faced ended up reaching base either by a hit or a walk. I think he had hit by pitch in there. So he didn't get through the third inning. That's kind of what I expected. Yeah, the key is does he have more good outings than bad? I think that's still very possible because he's incredibly talented. But I think that showed you why Connor Nolan is the Friday guy and why I think he has a potential to remain the Friday guy throughout the rest of the season.
But it was another outing for Arkansas where they only had 3 hits in the whole game against Stanford. So it's like Hagen Smith can go out there and not look the greatest, but Arkansas still gave up 5 runs, but they didn't give themselves any run support. So it was just a bad day at the plate for the most part until a little bit into the Louisiana game, but the bats just weren't there against Stanford. And you got to give credit to Quinn Matthews of Stanford. I mean, he pitched an incredible game, but this Arkansas team is supposed to hit the ball really well, and they did not.
Yeah, it was the most surprising part of this season has been how bad they have been offensively. I know during the Stanford game, I did a bunch of research on what's Arkansas splits against left-handed pitching versus compared to right-handed pitching, because that seems to be kind of the Achilles heel for Arkansas the last several years is they can't hit a left-hander, even though Quinn Matthews did not have a particularly great career ERA. He went out there and looked like, freaking Randy Johnson or something. But the game kept on going and Arkansas didn't hit right-handers either. And I was like, well, daggum, they can't hit anybody. And they ended up, even with the Indiana game and even with the late inning heroics against Louisiana Lafayette, they still only went 18 for 100. That's 180 batting average. Not going to win too many games with a 180 batting average. The fact that they went 2-1 in Round Rock with that was remarkable. And they were hitting 213 as a team through the first 2 weeks of the season. So just a very surprising start, considering this lineup is supposed to be based on everybody that knows anything about college baseball, based on what Dave Van Horn has said, based on what I've seen with my own 2 eyes. this offense should be way better than what it was through the first 2 weekends of the season.
Yeah, and they showed signs of that against Omaha on Wednesday. But before we get to that real quick, we got to hit the Louisiana game. We won't go super in depth. Just, the fact that Jackson Wiggins, he goes 6 innings. That's the longest outing of his career. And then, of course, the biggest play of the day for Arkansas was the homer hit by Jalen Battles in the 8th that put Arkansas ahead. That's really how they won the game, because it was hard to come by hits up until that point. So Jalen Battles gets the hit, basically wins the game for Arkansas, and Wiggins does a great job. They did have to bring Ramage in the 9th to close it out. But all right, let's move on to Omaha. So Arkansas, get right game. They scored 15 runs against Omaha. And I mean, I don't know, going into this, you didn't really know what to expect because the bats hadn't been there all year. And it's one of those midweek games. I mean, Omaha beat UCLA in a midweek last week, I think. So you were a little worried, like, is Arkansas, I mean, because if they can't hit, you got your midweek pitchers going. I mean, Mark Domiak started the game. Nothing against Mark Domiak because he's a good pitcher, but still, I mean, were you a little worried going into this one, Hutch?
Honestly, I think I posted this on the message board that if they don't get the bats going today, I don't know when they're going to, because I got to the ballpark and it was just a picture perfect day for college baseball. It was warm. I think it was in the 70s. The wind was not very strong, but it was blowing out. The first 2 weeks of the season, they had just horrible weather conditions to deal with. The wind was blowing in. It was cold, just not favorable conditions if you're a hitter. Now, that's not to excuse their horrible play, but it was definitely a difference on Wednesday. And I honestly almost kind of posted on them. I didn't do this, but I almost posed a question like over under 3.5 home runs for Arkansas, because I felt like they were going to break out and have a big offensive game. They ended up hitting 3, so that was pretty much spot on. And so it was a good thing to see. Omaha isn't the greatest, but as you said, they beat UCLA. Their pitcher that they started, Jackson Gordon, he didn't have great career numbers. Like his career ERA coming into the season was just under 7, but he had looked pretty good this season. Held UCLA scoreless for 3 innings. Had a couple of nice solid outings against San Jose State. But against Arkansas, they got to him. It took a few innings. I think the first 3 innings they only managed like 1 run, but then boy, that 4th inning came and boom, and they were off to the races.
Yeah, so it was tied 1-1 through 3, and then Arkansas comes in the 4th inning, scores 5 runs. A couple of the newcomers get homers. So Peyton Stovall finally gets one over the fence. Michael Turner, I mean, he's hit a couple where it should have been over the fence, but he finally gets one over the fence. Turner goes 3 for 3 at the plate with 3 RBI. Chris Lanzilli had a good day. Let's see, he went 2 for 4, 3 RBI. So you got some of your newcomers to finally get going, and one of the ones that you really needed to was Chris Lanzilli, and Peyton Stovall as well. But Lanzilli's a guy that we did the series preview of players, and I was excited about Lanzilli because if you look at his numbers at Wake Forest, I mean, this dude can hit the baseball, and we just haven't seen it yet. Of course, we know it's a midweek against Omaha, but still, for these newcomers to, finally find some success at the plate, that's got to be key moving forward.
And not just the fact that Lanzilli actually, got some hits and RBIs and stuff, but the scenario that it happened. Bases were loaded and 2 outs. Arkansas up to that point had been 0 for 11 with the bases loaded, and he rips a double into the corner, drives into, and really blew the game open. I mean, Arkansas, before the 4th inning, in the first 55 innings of the season, the most they had scored in a single inning was 3, and they had done that twice. And one of those was because of Jalen Battle's 3-run bomb against Louisiana. So they had not really had that big inning to really kind of separate. And that double by Lanzilli was just huge. And then they had the 5-run 4th inning, and then they followed up with a 7-run 5th inning. That was more runs than they had scored in any entire game up to that point. So just an offensive explosion that you felt like was coming. And really, we haven't mentioned it yet, but the whole thing started whenever Brady Slavens hit just an absolute bomb on top of the Hunt Center beyond the right field wall. It was a 390-foot blast. I think 104 off the bat, just absolutely crushed it. And that actually tied the game at 2 and set the stage for those, massive innings that Arkansas was able to kind of put the game away and allow Arkansas to play some of the younger freshmen that we hadn't seen yet.
Yeah, that hit by Slavens was huge, and it's great for him because we saw Slavens. He's had success at the plate, but another one of those guys where, I think he had the golden sombrero against Stanford, 4 at-bats, 4 strikeouts. So good for Brady Slavens. Before we wrap up, though, I do want to mention Mark Adamiak goes 2 2/3, gave up 4 hits, 1 run. It was earned. No walks, no strikeouts, though. But you got to see some of these bullpen arms. So Heston Toll got in, Evan Taylor got in, Brady Tygart got in, Gabe Starks, Nick Moten. So, Hutch, I'm just curious of all these pitchers, like, what are your takeaways? You don't have to talk about every single one of them, but maybe some of the guys that you looked at and you're like, okay, I think this guy can make an impact this year.
Evan Taylor, that's a guy that Dave Van Horn mentioned back in the fall as a guy that he thinks could have a breakout year. Left-handed arm. He has kind of a weird delivery, and he'd been pretty much only used as kind of like a left-handed specialist to come in and get a batter or two. But they let him go for 2 innings, and all he did was go 6 up, 6 down. Looked really, really impressive. And what made it even more impressive in my eyes is that he went 3 up, 3 down. Arkansas had the 7-run inning that lasted like 30 minutes, and he had to stay warm during the inning or whatever, and he came back out and goes 3 up, 3 down again. So really impressive outing by him. I was also impressed by both Brady Tygart and Nick Moten. They both can throw it really hard. Tygart, I think, set 95, 96. Both those guys threw a scoreless inning. They got into some trouble, but got out of it. So encouraging stuff there by the 2 freshmen who made their college debuts.
All right, well, Arkansas takes on Southeastern this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. First pitch Friday, 3 p.m., then Saturday, 2 p.m., Sunday, 1 p.m. All those can be streamed on the SEC Network Plus. So that's going to do it for us here on the HawgBeat Hour. Thank you, Andrew Hutchinson. Thank you, Alex Trader. And thank you, everybody out there, for listening.